orphanage in Denver was less a home and more a warehouse for human discards. Children arrived there when families couldn't afford to keep them, when parents died, when circumstances had deemed them inconvenient. The institution was run by a board of wealthy men who saw the orphans not as children requiring care, but as liabilities requiring minimal expense. Emma Walsh had been there since she was 8 years old. Now, at 21, she had become the oldest child in the facility, a girl who should have been released into the world years ago, but who had no family, no connections, and no prospects. The director had kept her on as unpaid labor, using her to manage the younger children, to do the cleaning, to handle the cooking and laundry that kept the orphanage functioning. Emma had become invisible, not just overlooked, but systematically erased from consideration as a human being deserving of future or value. She was fed the cheapest food. She was given the worn-out clothing that even the other orphans had rejected. She was spoken to as if she couldn't understand language, as if her thoughts and feelings were irrelevant. She was, in every practical sense, disposable. The day that changed everything began like any other. Emma was scrubbing the orphanage kitchen floor when a man arrived, a wealthy rancher named Thomas Merrick, who had come to make a donation to the orphanage. He was in his late 40s, with gray threading through dark hair and eyes that seemed to see everything with a kind of quiet assessment. The director, suddenly animated in the presence of wealth, gave Thomas a tour of the facility. He showed him the children's dormitories, carefully tidied for the occasion. Children scrubbed clean and dressed in their best clothing. He showed him the dining hall. He showed him everything designed to present the orphanage as a well-run institution. What he didn't show Thomas was the reality behind the performance. Thomas was thorough in his inspection, asking questions that seemed to miss nothing. How many children were in residence? How many staff? What was the daily food budget per child? When the director's answers revealed a severe lack of resources allocated to actual child welfare, Thomas made his position clear. "This is unacceptable," he said coldly. "These children are being maintained, not raised. They're being fed minimally, clothed in rags, and work without education or hope for future. This is not a charitable institution. It's exploitation." The director, defensive, began making excuses about limited funds, about the challenge of caring for so many unwanted children. "They're not unwanted," Thomas interrupted. "They're children. That's sufficient reason to treat them with dignity." As Thomas was being escorted out by the indignant director, he passed through the kitchen. There, scrubbing floors on her hands and knees, was Emma. She was thin to the point of gaunt. Her dress was held together with patches, and her hands were raw from constant work. But it was her eyes that caught Thomas's attention, eyes that held intelligence and dignity, despite the circumstances designed to strip both away. Thomas stopped. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emma," she replied quietly, not looking up from her work. She had learned that direct eye contact with authority figures often brought punishment. "How long have you been here?" "Since I was 8, Emma said. 13 years. Thomas felt something shift in his chest. 13 years in an institution that had clearly decided she had no value. 13 years of being treated as disposable. He turned to the director. "Why is she still here? She should have been placed in domestic work, apprentice, married off, given some kind of future." The director shrugged dismissively. "She's plain, quiet, unremarkable. No one wants her. She's useful here." Thomas looked back at Emma, really looked at her, past the thinness, past the worn clothing, past the systematic erasure of her humanity, and he saw something the director had missed entirely, a woman of quiet strength, of resilience, of genuine human worth. "I want her," Thomas said simply. The director laughed. "Want her for what?" "She has no skills except cleaning and cooking." "I want to employ her," Thomas replied, "as a housekeeper and manager of my household operations. Fair wages, room and board, and the opportunity to build a future. I'll pay the orphanage a placement fee, and I'll also provide an additional donation to improve conditions for the remaining children, on the condition that this donation goes to actual child welfare, not administrative costs." The transaction was completed within days. Emma found herself on a stagecoach heading toward Thomas's ranch in Wyoming, with a small trunk of new clothing, a letter of employment, and a head full of confusion about why a wealthy man had chosen her. The Merrick Ranch was larger than Emma had imagined, sprawling across thousands of acres with a main house, multiple outbuildings, and land that stretched toward distant mountains. Thomas showed her to a clean, comfortable room in the main house and explained her duties. She would manage household operations, oversee staff, and ensure that the ranch ran smoothly. It was work Emma was already doing at the orphanage, but with one crucial difference. Here, she was valued. Thomas treated her with respect. He asked her opinions about household management. He listened when she suggested improvements. He paid her a fair wage and ensured she had time for rest and for herself. Most importantly, he treated her as a person whose thoughts and feelings mattered. Emma had never experienced this kind of consideration. At first, she was suspicious. She waited for the moment when Thomas would reveal his true intentions, when he would treat her as disposable, as something to be used and discarded. But that moment never came. 6 months into her employment, Thomas called her to his office. Emma's heart raced. She had learned to fear such summons. But Thomas's expression was gentle. "I want to discuss your future," he said. "You've done exceptional work managing the household. The staff respects you. The operations have never run more smoothly. I want to formalize your position and increase your wages significantly. I also want to ask if you consider what you want your life to become." Emma didn't know how to answer. No one had ever asked her what she wanted. Her life had been something that happened to her, not something she directed. I don't know," she said honestly. "No one has ever asked me before." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "That's a tragedy," he said finally. "You deserve to have dreams, to have ambitions, to have a say in how your life unfolds. I want to help you figure out what those are." Over the following months, Thomas began to mentor Emma. He loaned her books from his extensive library. He discussed philosophy and history and the possibilities available to women in the modern world. He encouraged her to develop her own thoughts and opinions, treating her intellectual contributions as valid and valuable. And slowly, something unexpected began to happen. Emma began to believe that she had worth, that she was not disposable, that her life could be more than simply serving others. One evening, as they sat in the library after dinner, Thomas set down his book and looked at her directly. "Emma," he said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to understand that this comes with absolutely no obligation. You can hear what I have to say and decide that you want nothing to do with it, and everything between us will remain unchanged." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I have come to love you," Thomas continued, "not as an employee or as someone I've rescued, but as a woman of intelligence, strength, and genuine value. I'm asking if you would consider marrying me, not for security or obligation, but because I want to build a life with you as my equal partner." Emma felt tears streaming down her face. Marriage to a wealthy man. Partnership with someone who had chosen to see her worth when the entire world had deemed her disposable. "Yes," she said through tears. "Yes, I'll marry you." Their wedding took place at the ranch, attended by the community members who had come to respect Emma for her capable management and quiet integrity. Word of the marriage spread quickly, and some people questioned it. A wealthy rancher marrying a former orphan seemed incongruous to those who believed in rigid social hierarchies. But Thomas made a position clear to anyone who would listen. Emma was the woman he had chosen, and her past circumstances had no bearing on her value as a person or as a wife. Emma's life transformed in ways she could never have imagined. She had agency. She had resources. She had a voice that was heard and respected. But more than that, she had proof that she was not disposable. She was chosen, valued, treasured. Over the following years, Emma became known throughout Wyoming for her charitable work, particularly with orphans and other children society deemed disposable. She established programs to ensure that orphanages provided actual education and care rather than mere warehousing. She worked with Thomas to create apprenticeships and placement opportunities for older orphans. And most importantly, she worked to change the narrative about what disposable children actually were, not liabilities, but human beings with potential and worth. Years later, when people asked Emma about the moment Thomas had chosen her in the orphanage kitchen, about the moment she had understood that she had value, she would speak with the kind of clarity that comes from transformation. "I was invisible," Emma would say. I had been invisible for so long that I had started to believe I didn't exist. The orphanage had decided I was disposable, and I had internalized that judgment as truth. Then a man walked into that kitchen and saw me, really saw me, not as an object or a burden or a problem to be solved, but as a person worthy of consideration, worthy of future, worthy of claiming. She would pause, emotion visible on her face. That moment changed everything. She would continue, not because I was rescued by a wealthy man, though I was, but because someone refused to accept society's judgment about my worth. He looked at me and said, I want her, not to use her or exploit her, but to build a life with her, to make her his equal, to prove through his every action that disposable is never final, that anyone, no matter how society has written them off, can be claimed by someone who sees their true value. Emma lived to be 84 years old. She spent her final decades working to change laws about orphan care, to improve institutional practices, and to ensure that no child would be treated as disposable as she had been. On her grave, simple words were inscribed, Emma Merrick. She was disposable. A man claimed her. Through her life, she claimed thousands of others. And throughout Wyoming and beyond, the Merrick Foundation, established in her and Thomas's names, continued the work of proving that worth is not inherent in circumstance or status, but is inherent in being human. That disposable is a judgment society makes, not a truth, and that sometimes one person's willingness to see value where society sees only garbage can transform not just an individual life, but the world itself.